Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is a Tuesday edition of the Houtopia Football Podcast. I am Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast, Sports Radio 610, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on the Odyssey app and on Sports Radio 610 on 610 a.m. if you want to listen to it terrestrially. Appreciate you tuning in, downloading the podcast as we are off and running on a Memorial Day week. Hope everybody had a great long weekend. And Texans OTAs, they are back at it this week for 3 more OTA sessions, then mandatory minicamp next week, and then they're off for the summer. So it's a busy next couple weeks over at NRG Stadium, and we've got you covered from pillar to post on the whole thing. As much access as we have at OTAs. The next OTA session will be on Thursday this week. Well, the next one the media will have access to will be on Thursday this week, and it's expected that some of the players and the 3 coordinators, Frank Ross, Matt Burke, Bobby Slowick, are all going to meet with the media. So should be plenty to dig into. The Thursday episode will probably still drop Thursday. Might drop Friday if enough good stuff comes out of OTAs. But there will be a second episode this week for sure as we get into a mailbag episode today. A quick reminder, subscribe, rate, review the podcast. Appreciate when you do that. If you're just finding the podcast, easy enough and totally free to hit the subscribe button. And you'll get the podcast wherever it is you listen to your podcast, and then giving us a rating and a review, preferably 5 stars, is always encouraged as well. I mentioned we're going to do a mailbag today. houmailbag@gmail.com is the email address. houmailbag@gmail.com. So we'll get into the mailbag in just a little bit, but I guess just sort of just a level set here as to where we are. You know, we're starting to get into that part of the calendar year where experts and pundits are starting to really examine and handicap the upcoming season. And one of the things that I got really excited about this week, I read a piece by Jared Dubin of CBSSports.com over the weekend. And I'm into stuff like this. I don't know if you guys are. I'm a huge person when it comes to power rankings and anything quantitative. Even if it's subjective rankings, I really like, and especially when there's input from people, multiple opinions on something. It's not just one opinion, one person giving that opinion, like a power ranking, let's say. And Jared Dubin of CBS Sports had a piece that got me super excited about the season, as if there's not enough to be excited about already. But he and the other NFL experts at CBSSports.com ranked all 32 NFL teams, or rated all 32 NFL teams at 5 different entities or 5 different vocations on the offensive side of the football. So they're basically ranking all the offenses 1 through 32, but doing it in a way that was pretty methodical and that I liked. This group of experts ranked quarterback, play caller, offensive line, pass catchers, so wide receivers and tight ends all in the same group, and then running backs. So 5 groups, and rate them 1 through 5. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So the higher the score, the better. And then they came up with a weighted score because they compounded the quarterback in it. The quarterback counted more. I don't know how much more, but more than all the other positions. It was the most weighted position was quarterback, which makes perfect sense. That's what the league is. And this exercise, and then Jared Dubin divided these all off into tiers 1 through 6, 1 being the best, 6 being the worst. And it was really fun to read this piece because the Texans were tied for 6th with the Los Angeles Rams in this piece. And they were rating basically the potential of what these offenses could be in 2024. So we know the Texans play a really difficult schedule. Whether they end up being the 6th best offense in football, they'll probably need to be if they're going to accomplish what they want to accomplish this year based on the quarterbacks and the head coaches that they're going up against and what that schedule looks like. But I got super excited reading this piece on a number of fronts. Again, the Texans were tied for 6th. They were in tier 2. So, and again, there's tiers 1 through 6, and they were firmly in the middle of tier 2. The 3 tier 1 teams, in case you're wondering, were, and I'm doing this off of memory, but they were Kansas City, San Francisco, and Detroit were the top 3 teams. which I think is interesting in a quarterback-driven league. You got Mahomes, who's the best quarterback on the planet, number one. That makes sense. But then the number 2 and 3 offenses are led by Brock Purdy and Jared Goff, both of whom are good, but I wouldn't put either of them in my top 7 or 8 quarterbacks in football. But that just goes to show you how good a machine those two teams have created. Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, and then obviously Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for Detroit, with a tip of the hat to head coach Dan Campbell for hiring Ben Johnson. But it was an interesting exercise. The Texans, as I mentioned, were 6th. I'll give you a few of the highlights from this piece, and it's a good piece. It's a real easy read. Jared Dubin of CBSSports.com. I think a few things. The AFC South, that's the part I was most focused in on, because let's face it, if you win your division, if you go say 4-2 or 5-1 in your division and you're the Texans, there's a really good chance you're winning your division. You're going to get a home playoff game and you let the chips fall where they may. I think it may be tough sledding for the Texans this year, given the schedule and given some of the holes still on the team. They're not the same complete team that some of the tippy top teams are. They're really good, but I think battling for the number 1 or 2 seed in the AFC overall may be tough. But if you win the AFC South, you get in and then anything can happen. In the AFC South, the Texans are light years ahead of the other 3 teams offensively within this exercise that they did on CBSSports.com. The Texans, as I mentioned, tied for 6th. The Colts are 15th. They're in tier 4 out of 6. And then the Jags and the Titans are 21st and 22nd. They're in tier 5, which it's one thing for the Titans to be in tier 5 with a second-year quarterback who we're not even sure if he's good, and a new head coach and a lot of new pieces. For the Jags to be 21st with, quote, generational quarterback Trevor Lawrence and Super Bowl winning head coach, offensive head coach, by the way, Doug Peterson, is kind of a disgrace, actually. But we saw what the Jags were in the second half of last season. They were not a very good football team. So the Texans are way out in front of their AFC South brethren, which I think is going to make it a whole lot of fun in the division this year. And oh, by the way, the Colts are the team that's easily the closest to the Texans at 15th. They may have quarterback health issues with Anthony Richardson. In fact, Anthony Richardson's history tells us that they will. Now, they did sign Joe Flacco, which was a cagey signing by the Colts. Nevertheless, the Texans way out in front. The other thing about these rankings, again, this is the Jared Dubin piece on CBSSports.com, ranking all 32 NFL offenses based on their potential, is that the Texans had the best or tied for the best in 4 of the 5 categories that we outlined earlier. C.J. Stroud at quarterback, Bobby Slowick at play caller, offensive line, the Texans were tied for the best in the division. Wide receiver tight end group got a perfect 5. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But a perfect 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, easily the best in the division. The only position on offense where the Texans were less than first place was at running back, where running back goes Indianapolis 4.5, makes sense. Jonathan Taylor, he's the best back when healthy in the division. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars 4.0 out of 5 with Travis Etienne. The Texans and the Titans both tied at 3.5 on a scale of 1 to 5. Of course, the Texans led by Joe Mixon and the Titans led by newly acquired Tony Pollard. So running back, the only position where the Texans are anything but the best or tied for the best in the division. And I think that matches the eye test. The other things that I found interesting in this piece, man, this piece got me so fired up for the season. I got to tell you, just thinking about the Texans with this offense. I mean, this has a potential. The Texans have never had anything like this in the history of their team. An offense with this much skill position firepower. Never. And I know Andre Johnson's a Hall of Famer. I know DeAndre Hopkins is on a track to potentially be a Hall of Famer. I know they've had Arian Foster through the years and others. They've never had this much talent on the offensive side of the football at the same time. Not even close, really. When you talk about having Diggs and Tank and Nico, pick any of them as your number 1. You've never had a 2 and 3 like that. Call Tank Dell your third receiver. There's no third receiver in football like Tank Dell right now in the NFL, let alone in Texans history. So Super exciting. And then Dalton Schultz, obviously, at tight end, and Joe Mixon at running back. This is going to be a crazy year, man. They are armed to the teeth with offensive weapons. That said, a couple more interesting things about this article. The position groups or players that got a perfect 5 in this exercise, I thought was very interesting. There were, let me count, 1, 2, 6, 7, 10. There were 12, I'll call it offensive entities around the NFL that got a perfect 5.0 score in this exercise on CBSSports.com. Quarterback, Kansas City and Buffalo, the only 2 perfect 5s. For what it's worth, CJ got a 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. But Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, both got 5s. That makes sense. Play caller, Kansas City, Andy Reid, San Francisco, Kyle Shanahan, the Rams, Sean McVay, and Miami, Mike McDaniel, all got 5s as play callers. I think it's interesting that those are all some variation of West Coast Kubshanistani offenses that are being run there. I don't think that's a coincidence at all, especially, 2 of them. Andy Reid's off on an island by his own, but Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Mike McDaniel, pretty easy to connect the dots to those guys. And Bobby Slowick, by the way, a 4.5 out of 5, so he's not far behind. But these are position groups or entities that got a perfect 5. Offensive line, only 1, and it's the Detroit Lions. So you can see why their offense is rated so high, even with Jared Goff, who I think is good but not great at quarterback. That O-line is a linchpin for them, and really I think a part of their personality as a team. They're a very offensive line type personality, blue-collar type team. Wide receiver, this is where the Texans enter the chat. Wide receiver and tight end, so call it pass catchers. 3 teams got perfect 5s. San Francisco, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle. Minnesota, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. A lot of sins there. And then the Houston Texans. Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. They deserve a 5. So the Texans have one of the 12 entities that got a perfect 5 in this exercise. That's exciting. By the way, running back, 2 teams, San Francisco and Miami with a perfect 5. San Francisco with Christian McCaffrey, and then Miami, the 2-headed monster of Raheem Mostert and his 80 billion touchdowns that he scored last year, and Devon Achane, who is really, really fast. One other thing from this exercise, then we'll get to the mailbag, that was really interesting. No entity in the NFL got a score less than a 2. So even though it's a scale of 1 to 5, 2 was the lowest score that anybody got. There were only 4 entities in the NFL that got the lowest score in this exercise. The New England receiving core, the Charger receiving core, which New England is just bad. The Chargers are just decimated from cap casualties. They had to unload Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and it's a mess. The other 2, Nathaniel Hackett, play caller, the Jets. 0 respect for Nathaniel Hackett, and rightfully so. And Bryce Young, Carolina, the only quarterback with a score below a 2.5, Bryce Young, the number 1 overall pick. So Dave Canales has his work cut out for him in Carolina. So anyways, I just thought I'd share that with you. I would say go find the piece if you can on CBSSports.com, but just 10 minutes to spend getting excited about the Texans and what they look like offensively, particularly compared to the rest of the AFC South. All right, let's get into the mailbag, houmailbag@gmail.com, and we'll get right into it here. Send in your questions. If you're listening to this now and you know there's a question you want to ask, now's a great time to open up your email and send the question. And especially heading into this part of the calendar, the summertime. Xavier sends the first one in. Last year, the Texans couldn't stop the run, and they've gotten worse on paper at the defensive tackle position. What is the plan? I don't know that they were as bad at stopping the run as you make them out to be, Xavier. They were among the better run-stopping teams until late in the season, where Jonathan Taylor ran wild, and then Lamar Jackson ran wild on them. And Lamar Jackson and Jonathan Taylor, for that matter, are going to do that to teams. They were a pretty good run defense for most of the season. The Texans were much improved, certainly, over their historically poor performance in 2022. And when we say they've gotten worse on paper, have they gotten worse on paper at the defensive tackle position? I guess in terms of productivity and certainly name recognition they have. I mean, Sheldon Rankins is a known quantity, former first-round pick, played for the Saints, and did some good things for the Texans last year. Similarly, Malik Collins has been around a while. He, too, did a lot of good things for the Texans last year. The sense I get is that there is a certain type of defensive lineman that D'Amico is looking for, that maybe the guys they have on the roster fit a little better. Tim Settle, admittedly a journeyman. They signed Foley Fatukasi, who was cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he's coming off a contract where he was being paid $10 million a year. So at some point, somebody thought good things about Foley Fatukasi. And Khalil Davis, Kurt Heinisch. It's not, that's certainly an Achilles heel on this team. Maybe not an Achilles heel, but it's not a position where you look at the interior, the good interior offensive lines around the league, and you look at the Texans interior, the defensive line, especially when you look at their schedule, the Texans, and I don't know how many green check marks you give to the Texans on that side of the ball. The strength in this front seven is going to come from the defensive ends. And they can still bump the Nico Autry down inside when they need to at times. But as far as what is the plan, there ain't a whole lot left out there on the market to upgrade defensive tackle. The plan is to go with the guys that they have right now and hope that they give you kind of just solid workman-like performance in shutting down the run. But I think my guess is that there were some specific things that D'Amico's looking for in his defensive lineman. And they made a run to bring Sheldon Rankins back. It's just Cincinnati offered him more money, so you can't blame him for that. The Malik Collins thing, I will admit, is a little strange. And I know that Eric Armstead was somehow involved in all that they wanted to do a trade Collins for Armstead and bring Armstead in. And then Daniil Hunter entered the conversation at defensive end, and you can't do all those things. You can't get Armstead and Hunter and fit it all into the cap. It got complicated. I would just say if you're worried about the defensive tackle position now, then you better get some alcohol, because this is who it's going to be in all likelihood. There's not a lot of names out there unless there's a trade that's consummated somewhere along the way. You know, maybe if there's a team that's rebuilding that would look to get some draft capital and trade a defensive tackle. I look at that Washington team, and they've got a couple really good defensive tackles, and they're a team that's probably going to be picking in the top 5 next year. So we'll see. But barring a trade, I think this is who you're rolling with here, and we'll see what the waiver wire yields. Brad texts in, Kamari Lassiter, is he going to be outside or is he going to be nickel this season? I think we're going to wait and see. If I had to guess, I would guess he's going to be inside, playing slot corner, playing nickel, and they're going to go with one of the more veteran cornerbacks on the outside. I've come to grips with the fact that it looks like the CB2 spot, the cornerback spot opposite Derek Stingley Jr., is going to be the hope that the penny stock of Jeff Okudah or the penny stock of CJ Henderson pans out. This appears to be the strategy that they're going with here. And it's not great. But I understand the strategy. You can't sign 12, 15, $20 million a year players everywhere. I understand that. And if I do trust the coaching staff to get the most out of a player who's got a lot of physical tools that have been unrealized, it's this staff. I think for the most part, guys on the Houston Texans played improved football in 2023 over what they gave you in 2022, with a few exceptions. But I think Lassiter, if I had to guess, is going to be on the inside, is going to be playing nickel. I just don't know that they want a rookie playing on the outside, especially early in the season. They've got some serious quarterbacks that they face really up and down the schedule. So I would guess inside on Kamari Lassiter. Cody from McMahon. I don't even think Cody has a question. The last mailbag I did, I was wondering, is there a town called McMahon? And did they want to change the name after Vince McMahon got into all of his trouble that he's in right now? So Cody's just providing clarity on McMahon for us here. But if you're a loyal listener, I'm guessing you might care about this. So indulge me for 60 seconds. Cody says, McMahon is a very small town located 15 minutes east of Lockhart and approximately an hour and 45 minutes west of Katy, north of I-10. I feel like I'm asking Siri or Alexa, tell me where McMahon is. Tell me. He says, we're a town with a population of about 300 people. Oh, that's awesome. It consists of a very busy convenience store, a women's boutique shop, 2 Baptist churches, and an incredible pizzeria and tap room. Let me stop right there. That's got pretty much everything I need right there. As long as they come out and fix my cable when I need it fixed and fix my Wi-Fi when I need it fixed. And the 2 Baptist, I'm assuming the convenience store has alcohol. I'm assuming, although with the ratio of Baptist churches to convenience stores in this town, there's a concern, I guess, that maybe this falls in a dry area. That would be an issue for me. Oh no, tap room. Never mind. Pizzeria and tap room. You can get beer there. Sorry, Cody. But I think you've got everything. The only thing that's missing, I would say, places that I go to, can I get a good cigar at the convenience store? That would be one. Is there somewhere I can drink outdoors, like when it's nice outside, other than my back patio or front porch? That sounds like Xanadu, man. Pizzeria, a tap room. If I need a little God in my life, I've got a choice between 2 Baptist churches. That's good stuff. He says the original name of the town was Whizzerville, referencing the sound the newfangled Model Ts made when driving through the area. Okay, are you messing with me now, Cody? Are you fucking with me? Whizzerville? As the town grew, they were granted a post office. Ooh, congrats. Good job. However, the postmaster refused to name his post office Whizzerville. Can't say I blame him. So the people of the town changed the name to McMahon after a local prominent farmer rancher in the area. Some current folks have suggested we change the name back to Whizzerville. Yeah, this is the Redskins versus Commanders of Central Texas. You got all the people wanting Whizzerville back. They want the Model T logo back on the side of the helmet. They don't want Vince McMahon's face on the side of their helmet anymore. I'll be honest with you. McMahon, given everything Vince McMahon has found himself in, all that trouble, is probably a more offensive name than Whizzerville, ironically. But Cody, I'm curious which side you're on. Whatever side you're on, that's the one I'm rooting for. If you want Whizzerville back, by God, the Houtopia Football Podcast wants Whizzerville back as well. All right, next one. Corey in Denver. After the 2024 season, the 4-year cycle of the added 17th game will have completed a full rotation. For 2025, do AFC teams have 9 home games again as they did in 2021 and 2023? If so, will the Texans play the 17th game against a team from the NFC South again as they did in 2021? And he goes on to write 2 more paragraphs saying, make the math make sense, please. No, here's the thing. This is how that 17th game works, is that, yeah, the Texans have 8 home games this year. They'll have 9 next year. It just goes every other year. 8 the even numbered years, 9 the odd numbered years, until they go to an 18-game schedule, which eventually they will. As far as who they play the corresponding place team in the division from the NFC that they played 2 years ago. Okay. I know that's a lot. For example, they play the Cowboys this year. That's their 17th game. They played against the NFC East back in 2022. And the Cowboys finished first last season. The Texans finished first last season. So they're going to play the Cowboys. Next season, they will play the corresponding team from the NFC. Who did they play? Oh, they played the NFC South. Yeah, the NFC South this past year. Right. So they will play the NFC South again. Yes. The corresponding team from the NFC South. So whatever place the Texans finish, whoever the corresponding team is from the NFC South, that's who it'll be. I don't know how podcast friendly that question was, but I'm amazed that people who are diehard football fans are still confused as to how the 17th game gets decided. That's why we're playing the Cowboys this year in Dallas, people, on a Monday night game. All right, Chris in the ATL. What up, Chris? As a follow-up to your interest in game shows, for those who missed it, one of the questions on the last mailbag was, what do you watch when you're not watching sports? Amy and I watch a ton of the Game Show Network, a shit ton of the Game Show Network, way too much of the Game Show Network. As a follow-up to your interest in game shows, one of my favorites was The Price is Right. Agreed. Keeping with the game show theme, let's look at Texans Price is Right stat showcase. Chris, you're scratching me right where I itch. Below are 4 amazing stat items for you to consider in the 2024 season. let's say each individual player's stat equals $1. What would be your total bid for the wonderful Texans stat bundle? Okay, now here are the stats. Combined sacks between Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Stroud total TDs, air and ground. Number of Mixon 100-yard rushing games. Each game is $1, not each yard. Okay. And number of Stingley interceptions. Okay, this is a good exercise. I would say number of Will Anderson Jr., I think they're both going to be double-digit sack guys. Look, Danielle Hunter rolls out of bed and gets 11 and a half sacks. So I'm going to say Danielle Hunter, someone's getting doubled and someone's getting singled. I think they're both double-digit guys. I would say for the two of them, I'm going to go 24 and a half sacks. I'll just go even 24. 24 sacks, 12 apiece. Maybe 14 for Danielle, 10 for Will. That sounds about right, doesn't it? Stroud total touchdowns, air and ground. I think he threw 23 touchdown passes last year. I know he ran for a few. I think he goes over 30 touchdown passes this year. If he doesn't go over 30 touchdown passes this year, I don't know what they need to do to get over 30 touchdown passes. I'm going to say 33 touchdown passes through the air, and I am going to say 3 on the ground. So a total of 36. All right, so far $60. Number of Mixon 100-yard rushing games. I'll go 3 there. 3. So we're up to 63. Number of Stingley interceptions. See, he intercepted 5 last year, but I think people learned their lesson. I think they're going to be not throwing at Stingley this year. That said, I think he'll still get 2 interceptions. I think he's going to have an amazing year. I just don't think he's going to get tested a lot. I think Sauce Gardner had no interceptions last year, and nobody's saying he's bad. So the total would be $65. And then Chris says, don't forget to have your conference opponents spayed or neutered. What the hell's your problem, Chris? I know that's Bob Barker's catchphrase, but good Lord. Yeah, screw it. Yeah, spay and neuter them all. He also says, for fun, after the season is over and stats are compiled, if I get within $5 without overbidding, okay. So I can't go over. If it's 64, I'm over. But that's the way the Price is Right works. Okay, so if it's somewhere, if I get within $5, so if I'm somewhere, it's 70, somewhere between 65 and 70, what do I get? A case of my favorite Waterloos. My favorite sparkling water. I love Waterloo. Waterloo's good. They got a lot of good flavors. Chris, have you tried the new mojito flavored or the pina colada flavored? They don't have alcohol in them, but they taste like it. They'd be perfect to put the pina colada would be perfect to mix in. Oh, okay, good. You're a big fan of the blackberry lemonade. Yeah, me too. I like that. I like the cherry limeade too. Really good. Waterloo's money. All right, a couple more here. I've got 3 more questions. You with me? All right. This is from Eating Well. I don't think that's this person's real name. If so, if the last name of the family is Well and they name their kid Eating, then that's like Northwest. You know what I mean? Love the show and the content. Thank you, Eating Well. What are your thoughts of the sudden focus on the Texans and all this newfound fandom with the team? Do loyal and diehard Texan fans from the area feel a bit steamed about the rush of interest that's brought ticket prices up, for example? Eating Well says, I'm from Toronto, Canada. I've been a fan since 2015. There's been more down years than up. I've been ridiculed for being a Texan fan when most here are Bills fans or fans of the big teams like the Patriots, the Cowboys, Chiefs, Packers, etc. Couldn't be any more proud to have endured those tough years to be where the team is now. Haven't been to a game yet, but really do hope to make it down eventually. My sense I get from Texan fans, and I interact with Texan fans a fair amount, I would say way more than your average media member does, between social media, going to Texan events, having a radio show 4 hours a day, living with a season ticket holder, going out a lot, being in bars, all those things. I interact with a lot of Texan fans. The Texan fans don't strike me as a fan base that's being very that's being gatekeeperish on letting fans either in or back in that weren't there. I think most Texan fans, the hardcores, the diehards, understand why people went away in the first place. I mean, this was not your normal tear it down and rebuild situation with the Texans. There were some things going on that offended the sensibilities of smart people that the Texans were doing for a couple of years. Thankfully, they're not doing those things anymore. Thankfully, they're doing the polar opposite of those things and doing smart things now. as a franchise. So my sense I get from Texan fans is they're happy to welcome people back in. I think they love the newfound recognition that the Texans are getting, because they're getting more than just, hey, they might be a good football team. The Texans are getting a rub where they're a cool team to root for. I think there's a cool factor with D'Amico Ryans, with C.J. Stroud, with Will Anderson, with Tank Dell. I think the McNairs have done an amazing job of doing a 180 on their public image. Cal and Hannah are, I think, beloved by the fan base now. I don't know if I'm overstating that or not. I like them a lot. I think they're both great people. But I think the fact that Cal is not your conventional kind of stuffed suit owner was probably something that when the team was really bad, that's why he got called Tommy Boy and things like that. Now that they're good and he's chosen the right people to run this thing, I think people view him as the guy who's barbecuing in his backyard, and he's way more this isn't just perception. I think this is reality. He's way more of a real person than most of these NFL owners. So I think Texan fans are really, really cool with it. And if you ever make it down from Toronto to come see a game here, let me know so I know what your real name is, Eating Well. And you can see for yourself. But that's the sense I get. I don't know if you're hearing this, email me. I'm curious. I really am curious what people think about that. This is a good problem to have, right? Like after the 2 years of Cully and Lovey, and the year before that with Bill O'Brien and Easterby and all that stuff, this is a great problem to have, that there's new people jumping on the bandwagon, or there's people who are jumped off and now they're jumping back on again. This is tremendous, tremendous stuff. All right. Two more. This is from Joe Q. Joe Q says, what do you think about the risks associated with QB1 availability? How much of it is attributed to scheme and coaching? How much of it is the O-line? How much of it is the QB's ability, mental and physical gifts? And how much of it is just luck? And what he's talking about is just injuries when it comes to quarterbacks. Is the NFL basically a casino where we give D'Amico 2 dice, and if he rolls a 2, 3, or 4, CJ is unavailable, and we go 4 and 13. And if he rolls a 5 or higher, then we're in the fight for 11 and 6. Or are D'Amico and CJ himself primarily accountable for CJ's availability? I think it's like you may not like this answer, Joe Q, but it's certainly a combination of those things. I think you can look at any of the quarterbacks that have missed serious time, and the reason for them missing that time is due to any of those things you just named. Like Aaron Rodgers going out for the season, because Joe Q gives me a list of quarterbacks, like the high-profile quarterbacks and how many games they've played over the last 4 seasons. Like Josh Allen's played the most with 66 games over the last 4 seasons. Mahomes is right there with 65. Jared Goff, 63. And then you go down to Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott with 50. Well, Aaron Rodgers would be at 67 or 66. He'd be tied with Josh Allen if he hadn't torn his Achilles on the 4th play of the game. I don't know that you can put that on an offensive line. I mean, I know he got hurt on a hit, but the Achilles, it just goes. Some guys, you just plant the wrong way and you get an injury. Joe Burrow hurt a wrist, Joe Burrow got hurt in training camp last year, and there was a non-contact injury. So they come in all forms. The only one I really care about is the Texans. And I would say, so CJ missed 2 games last year. I think that was the offensive line's fault. He got slammed on the turf by Quinnen Williams on a play where Quinnen Williams just ran over whoever, I guess it was Juice Scruggs, who was playing left guard, on a play that might have been a late hit. That's part of it too. So I think the responsibility you have as an organization is to take the ones that you can control and then try to set your quarterback up for optimal health that way. And I think the Texans have made the effort to do that on the offensive line. They've invested a ton in the offensive line, both with draft capital, salaries, or both. As for CJ, yeah, he's responsible for that too. In fact, CJ said that he got sacked 11 times the first 2 games. And he realized, I forget what podcast he said this on, but he realized, like, after 2 games, like, I can't do this all the time. Like, it can't be this way. So he made some changes as far as getting the ball out faster and setting up protections and so forth. So I think it's a combination of those things. I don't think it's any one thing. I think the most important thing for the Houston Texans is health along the offensive line, and for CJ Stroud to continue to acknowledge that getting rid of the football and just tossing it away helps you avoid sacks and turnovers, the two worst things that you can have as an offense. I feel really good about the front office of the Texans recognizing what they need to do to optimize CJ's availability, and I feel really good about what CJ needs to do in order to optimize his availability. The only thing I feel bad about is they have to go back to MetLife Stadium this season. That's the only thing that scares me health-wise with CJ, other than just bad luck. And you can't do anything about that. Good question as always, Joe Q. Appreciate you. All right, last one. It's an Astros question from Miggy. Miggy says, Sean, you're very outspoken about your disgust with the Jose Abreu situation. How are you processing things now that he's back with the big club? I'm doing okay. I don't think that's your question, like, how are you doing? But how, like, exactly, like, what am I rooting for? I root for the Astros to win. So when Jose Abreu comes up to the plate, particularly when there's men on base, I am rooting for a positive outcome for the Astros, first and foremost. I want them to win baseball games. I want them back in the postseason. I was happy to see Jose Abreu get an RBI single yesterday, okay, in the moment. Now, here's the tricky part, is that I don't know how well Jose Abreu needs to perform for the team to keep him hanging around occupying a roster spot, and B, occupying a spot in the everyday lineup. And my fear is that it is a very low bar for him to clear, and in that it would be a clearable bar, but a bar that's detrimental. And more importantly, a bar that's lower than just having John Singleton in there every day. That's the most important part to me. Play the best guy. So I don't like the fact that in the first game back last night, not only did Abreu start, but he started at first base in a lineup where Singleton was the DH. Singleton is a noticeably better defensive player than Jose Abreu. What the hell are we doing? So my trust level in the organization when it comes to this Abreu thing is very, very low. I don't trust Espada to manage this situation. I don't think Dana Brown is really controlling this situation. I think he's just a mouthpiece with this particular situation, the Abreu situation, for Crane and Bagwell. And it's one game back for Abreu, and he looked okay. Base hit. Yay. But my trust level is very low on this thing right now with Bagwell's assessment of what Abreu was at the Florida Complex League, with the assessment of anybody in his at-bats in Sugarland, where I saw some of those. I saw the video for those. He looked terrible. I need to see what the rest of the Seattle series looks like, and maybe this Minnesota series this weekend. Like, I'll give it a week and see what it looks like. If at the end of the week he's got like 2 hits, if he's 2 for 22, we got to eject on this thing, because he's not bringing anything else to the table. Even at his best, all he is a hitter. He's not a good defensive player. He's not a speedy base runner. Good leader, that's fine. And if he wants to hang around and wear a uniform like some fan who won a contest or something, by all means, let him sit in the dugout. But I just don't need him occupying a spot in the lineup. But as far as how I'm processing it, I'm rooting for him in the moment. Here's the other thing, Miggy. I don't blame Astro fans who are rooting for Jose Abreu not to get hits. This has been such a baseball stressful situation. I don't want to say stressful, like life is stressful, but like baseball stressful situation for Astro fans. And it's been so polarizing. I say polarizing. Polarizing implies that there's equal groups on either side. I think most people are pitchforks and torches against Jose Abreu and Jeff Bagwell right now. I can't even blame Astro fans for rooting for Jose Abreu to get out when he's at the plate, just to get him out of our lives. I can't. I'm not doing that, but I'm not going to tell those Astro fans that they're bad fans or how to fan. I'm not into that. I'm not into that. I'm not into Astro fans should be rooting for this or should be rooting. No, there's nothing rational about any of this. So root for what you root for, man. The question was, what do I root for? That's how I'm rooting. And it's difficult. It's difficult. All right. Again, HOUmailbag@gmail.com. We'll have another episode coming up later this week, either Thursday or Friday. So keep an eye out for that. One way that you can help out and not have to keep an eye out for anything is to hit subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. We always appreciate that. And I always go longer on these mailbags than I think I will because you guys ask such good questions. So be sure to email in a few more for next week. So in the meantime, for my producer, Anthony Irwin, I'm Sean Pendergast. I am out of time. Have a great week, everybody. Texans OTAs continue. See you at 6 a.m. on Payne and Pendergast every morning this week. And rock on.